Formula One just did the unthinkable. The fastest cars on Earth are now slowing down on the straight with the throttle fully down, losing up to 50 kilometers per hour in seconds with zero warning. And it gets even worse. Because when one car loses that speed and another doesn't, the gap can explode past 40 kilometers per hour instantly. That's not racing. That's a high-speed trap. And it already caused a near disaster that should have never happened in Formula One. Now the FIA is in emergency meetings. Drivers are speaking out. Teams are scrambling for solutions. But here's the part that changes everything. This isn't a small problem. This isn't even a fixable problem in the short term. Because the system causing all of this is the one that was supposed to save the sport. So now there's only one question that matters. Did Formula One just create a future it can't control? At first, it didn't look like a collapse. It looked like a breakthrough. A smarter Formula One. Cleaner. More efficient. Built for the future. That was the promise. An engine split perfectly in half. 50% electric power. 50% combustion. A bold idea that sounded impossible to get wrong. And on paper, it didn't. Everything made sense. Balanced numbers. Clear objectives. A vision that manufacturers fully supported. But here's where everything starts to fall apart. Because the balance was never real. While the electric power nearly tripled, the battery stayed exactly the same. Same capacity. Same energy. But now, under extreme demand. That single decision is the origin of the entire disaster. Because it creates a system that cannot sustain itself. At full deployment, the battery drains in seconds. Around 8 to 10 seconds, and it's gone. Completely empty. And when that happens, the car changes instantly. Not gradually. Not predictably. Instantly. The system switches from delivering power to recovering energy. Even if the driver is still flat on the throttle. That moment is where Formula One stops behaving like Formula One. Because from that point on, the driver is no longer in full control. The system takes over. And that creates something the sport has never seen before. Unpredictable performance in the middle of a straight. Think about that. A driver is pushing at maximum speed. And suddenly, the car stops accelerating the way it should. Not because of skill. Not because of setup. Because the energy is gone. And now the car is trying to recharge itself while still racing. That's the core problem. But here's where it becomes even more unsettling. Drivers are already adapting. Not by going faster, but by going slower. They lift off early. On straights. Before the braking zone. Not to prepare for the corner. But to recharge the battery before the system forces them to slow down even more. So they slow down to avoid being slowed down harder later. That contradiction is the clearest proof something is fundamentally broken. And it changes everything about how the sport feels. Because this is no longer about pushing to the absolute limit. It's about managing a system. Managing energy. Managing timing. Managing something invisible but decisive. And when that happens, the essence of Formula One starts to disappear. Less instinct. Less control. Less of that moment where a driver does something extraordinary. But this is still just the beginning. Because everything becomes far more dangerous the moment another car enters the equation. Everything changes when another car is involved. Because this system doesn't just fail. It fails differently for everyone. One driver exits a corner with a full battery. Another exits with almost nothing left. Same track. Same second. Completely different performance. At first, it looks normal. Both cars accelerate. Both drivers commit. But then, it happens. One car keeps pulling. The other suddenly stops gaining speed. Not gradually. Abruptly. That's super clipping. And in that exact moment, the gap between them doesn't just increase. It explodes. We're talking about over 40 kilometers per hour in seconds. Now imagine you're the driver behind. You're flat out. Focused on your braking point. Everything feels under control. Until suddenly, it isn't. The car in front is slower than expected. Much slower. And there is no warning. No light. No signal. No predictable pattern. Just a car losing speed where it shouldn't. That's not racing. That's survival. Pure instinct. And this is exactly what turned a technical problem into a real threat. Japan. High-speed section. One car ahead enters super clipping. Loses speed instantly. The car behind arrives at full pace. The closing speed is brutal. There is almost no time to react. The driver behind moves offline. Avoids contact. By meters. Just meters. And that moment changes everything. Because now, this is no longer theory. It's reality. And this is the part no simulation truly captured. Not how the system works alone, but how it behaves in traffic. Because Formula One is not about driving alone. It's about fighting. Wheel to wheel. Corner to corner. And that requires one thing above everything else. Predictability. Drivers push to the limit because they trust what the car will do. But now, that trust is gone. Because the car can change behavior without warning. Not based on skill. Not based on input. Based on energy. Invisible, uncontrollable, constantly changing. And when that trust disappears, everything becomes dangerous. Drivers hesitate. Or worse, they commit, and the car responds differently than expected. That's when mistakes happen. That's when accidents happen. And that's when the sport crosses a line it was never supposed to cross. But here's what makes this even harder to accept. This wasn't a surprise. Drivers warned about this before the season even started. They described it. They predicted it. They made it clear. And still, nothing changed in time. Which leads to a question that now feels unavoidable. If everyone inside Formula One saw this coming, why did it take a near disaster for the FIA to react? And more importantly, what happens next time when there isn't enough space to escape? The FIA couldn't ignore it anymore. Not after the data. Not after the near disaster. Not after drivers kept repeating the same warning again and again. So something changed. They didn't wait. They called an emergency meeting. And that word matters more than anything. Because Formula One doesn't use emergency unless something is already out of control. Teams arrived with telemetry. Engine manufacturers brought simulations. Engineers came with solutions and concerns they had been holding back for months. And for the first time, the tone shifted. Quietly, but clearly. The FIA stopped defending the system and started trying to contain it. And that is the real confirmation. Because you don't try to contain something unless it's already breaking. Now multiple fixes are on the table. Some quick, some complex. But every single one comes with a problem. One of the most urgent fixes targets something very specific. The reason drivers are lifting off early. Right now, lifting off allows the car to recover more energy than staying flat on the throttle. Which means drivers are being rewarded for going slower. So the proposed solution is simple. Make energy recovery the same, whether the driver lifts or not. Remove the advantage. Remove the behavior. Make the straights feel normal again. But even that doesn't fix the core issue. Because super clipping still exists. It just becomes less aggressive. Another solution goes deeper. Reduce the electric power when the battery drops too low. Stretch the energy. Avoid the sudden drop in speed. Make everything more predictable. But again, there's a cost. Less peak power. Less acceleration. Less of that brutal intensity that defines Formula One. And suddenly, the entire debate changes. Because now the question isn't how to make the cars faster. It's how to make them safer. And that shift changes everything. Because once safety becomes the priority, it means performance has already failed. And that's why the FIA is in real trouble. Not just because something is broken, but because fixing it changes what Formula One is supposed to be. Make it safer, and it becomes slower. Keep it fast, and it stays unpredictable. There is no perfect solution. Only compromise. And that's the part nobody wants to say out loud. This cannot be fully fixed this season. Because the real problem is locked into the design. The batteries are too small. The power demand is too high. That balance cannot be changed without rebuilding the entire system. And you can't rebuild Formula One in the middle of a championship. So what happens now? The season continues. With patches. With adjustments. With small fixes trying to control a much bigger problem. Which means every race from this point forward is not just competition. It's a live experiment. Testing limits. Exposing flaws. Revealing how far this system can go before something worse happens. And that leads to the most uncomfortable reality of all. The FIA is no longer in control of the situation. They are reacting to it. Trying to stay ahead of something that is already ahead of them. And if that's true, then the real question is no longer about fixing the rules. It's about surviving them. At least, until something forces a complete reset. And this is where everything becomes impossible to ignore. Because this is no longer just a bad regulation. This is a structural failure. A failure that reaches far beyond 2026 and straight into the future of Formula One. Behind the scenes, something has already changed. The focus is no longer on fixing this season. It's on escaping it. Quietly. Urgently. Teams are no longer asking how to make the current system better. They're asking how to make sure this never happens again. Because once a regulation forces drivers to slow down on purpose, once it creates unpredictable speed differences, once it turns racing into energy management, you're not refining the sport anymore. You're losing it. And that's exactly why all attention is shifting toward 2027. Because that is no longer just another regulation update. It's a reset. A complete reset. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Even that reset comes with a risk. Because the problem wasn't just technical. It was philosophical. The idea of a 50-50 engine wasn't wrong. In fact, it made perfect sense. Balance. Efficiency. A bridge between past and future. But the execution ignored one fundamental rule. If you increase power, you must increase capacity. And that didn't happen. The battery stayed the same. The demand skyrocketed. And the system collapsed under its own logic. That's not a minor mistake. That's a foundational error. And now Formula One has to decide what to do next. Because there are only two paths forward. 1. Double down on complexity. Keep pushing electric systems. Refine them. Control them better. But accept that the driver will always be limited by the system. Or 2. Rebalance everything. Give control back to the driver. Make performance predictable again. Even if that means stepping back from the original vision. Neither option is easy. Both come with consequences. But one thing is already clear. What we are seeing right now cannot continue. Because Formula One depends on something deeper than technology. It depends on trust. Drivers must trust the car. Fans must trust what they're watching. And right now, that trust is breaking. Drivers don't trust how the car will behave from one moment to the next. Fans don't understand why cars are slowing down on straights. And when both of those things happen at the same time, the sport enters dangerous territory. Because this is no longer just about lap times. It's about identity. What is Formula One supposed to be? The fastest, most precise, most extreme form of racing in the world. Or a complex system where performance is controlled, not unleashed. Right now, it's stuck in between. And that might be the worst place it can be. Because it satisfies no one. Not the drivers. Not the teams. Not the audience. And that's why 2026 will be remembered. Not as a step forward. But as a warning. A moment where Formula One pushed too far, too fast. And discovered the limits of its own ambition. But here's the final piece. The one everything has been building toward. Even if 2027 fixes everything, even if the cars become predictable again, even if the drivers regain full control, there's one question that won't disappear. How did this happen in the first place? Because this wasn't hidden. This wasn't impossible to predict. The data was there. The warnings were there. The risks were clear. And still, it was approved. Which means the real issue isn't just the regulation. It's the process behind it. And if that process doesn't change, then this won't be the last time Formula One finds itself here, at the edge, trying to fix something that should have never been broken. And that's why this moment matters more than any race. Because this is not just about engines, not just about rules. It's about whether Formula One can still control its own future, or whether it's already reacting to a mistake that was too big to fix from the start.